first cold breath of winter, before anyone understood what fear truly meant for that town. A single sentence would echo through every police briefing, every sleepless night, every unanswered question. He walked back into the house because he wanted to feel what he'd done. What followed would become one of the darkest and most morally devastating investigations the region had ever witnessed. This is the story of a quiet graduate student whose mind carried a storm no one saw coming. A story rebuilt here with changed names, new places, and fictionalized details. But the moral truth remains painfully real. It begins with a man named Evan Rhyder, a doctoral student in behavioral criminology at a small mountain university. A man who moved through corridors with lowered shoulders and a steady, uneasy stillness, as if he were always listening for something no one else could hear. People who knew him described him as distant, intense, oddly formal in his gestures, and strangely calm in moments when others felt anxious. That quietness, they would later realize, wasn't confidence, it was suppression. On a freezing November night, long after the bars closed and the music in the student district had faded into distant echoes, 4 students living in a hillside house were attacked by someone who moved with an eerie precision. Evan, somewhere between obsession and delusion, had convinced himself he was studying fear patterns, but what he executed that night went far beyond research. It was cruelty disguised as curiosity, destruction disguised as intellectual detachment. He left the house, walked down the path, and then for reasons investigators would debate for months, he walked back toward it, pausing long enough for a motion-activated camera nearby to capture the faint silhouette of a figure, hesitating at the edge of the light. His breath fogged once, then twice, before he vanished into the darkness again. That hesitation became the fulcrum of the entire case. Detectives would replay that moment hundreds of times, trying to understand whether he returned from guilt, thrill, confusion, or something far more disturbing. Inside the police station, days later, Detective Maura Ellis stared at the evidence board. Tire tracks, phone pings, a scrap of synthetic fiber, a grainy vehicle image. None of it felt enough. She kept returning to one thought. Whoever did this wasn't driven by impulse. It was a man who studied behavior, a man who needed control. When the white sedan appeared on campus security footage circling the same block 12 times before the crime, everything changed. Evan's name surfaced. A teaching assistant, a criminology student writing papers about offender rituals, predatory stalking, detached violence. His professors had admired him. His classmates had avoided him. When detectives knocked on his apartment door, Evan opened it with the same unsettling calm as professors described. His hands stayed low, stiff at his sides. His eyes didn't widened in surprise or narrow in suspicion. They simply stared, as if calculating light and shadow. "It's late," he whispered. "Is something wrong?" Detective Ellis watched the faint tremor in his fingers. Not from fear, she thought, but anticipation. That tremor became her compass. "We need to ask you a few questions," she said softly, her tone the kind used for suspects who build walls in their heads. The living room smelled like disinfectant. Books stacked with perfect alignment crowded his desk. Criminal profiling, forensic psychology, case studies about hunting patterns. Evan answered every question with clinical detachment. He recited his whereabouts like a memorized script, but something in his cadence felt rehearsed, too smooth, too careful. When Ellis asked why his car had been seen near the victim's neighborhood 12 times that night, his jaw flexed with a controlled swallow. "Coincidence," he murmured. "I drive when I'm stressed. It helps me think." But his posture betrayed him. His shoulders rose defensively, chin angled down, one foot subtly retreating into the carpet. Micro-movements of a man absorbing pressure he couldn't control. As evidence mounted over the next week's DNA linkage, digital footprints, vehicle analysis, Evan's calm slowly cracked. During the final interrogation, Ellis turned off the overhead fluorescent lights and left only the small desk lamp between them. The room dimmed to a single circle of warm light against the cold walls. The atmosphere shifted. Evan's chest moved in shallow, deliberate breaths. His fingers pressed into the wood table, leaving half-moon imprints on his skin. "Evan," Ellis said quietly, leaning into the shadows. He walked back toward that house. People don't do that unless they're haunted by something. He didn't speak. She watched his eyes flicker, not left, not right, but inward, into himself, as though replaying the steps he took. "You weren't just leaving a scene," she continued. "You were returning to it because you felt something pull you back." His throat tightened. A slow blink. A small tremor. The facade was slipping. The silence in the room thickened into something suffocating. Finally, his voice cracked through the quiet, barely audible. He needed to know. Each word trembled like a confession born against his will. To know what? Ellis pressed, her tone steady, unshaking. Evan lifted his eyes, and for the first time since the night of the murders, he lost control of his breathing. "If I still felt anything." That sentence marked the psychological collapse investigators had been waiting for. It wasn't an admission of guilt, not legally, but morally, emotionally, spiritually. It marked the moment Evan stepped out of his carefully architected persona. When the case went to trial, I spoke on say I thought knowledge was harmless. I thought detachment protected me. I was wrong about everything. Though the specifics were fictionalized here, the moral remains real. A man who believed he could separate intellect from empathy discovered too late that human life cannot be studied like a theory or observed like a detached phenomenon. It must be respected, or everything shatters. The story ends where it began. A cold winter night, a man walking back toward a silent house, misunderstanding the gravity of what he had done. And in that return, he sealed his fate. Sometimes, one wrong choice can destroy a lifetime. Learn from their story. Choose kindness. Choose life. This was just the beginning. The most mysterious and shocking crime stories are still ahead. Subscribe to Crime Flow Narratives and be among the first to uncover what comes next.